Whether you've been drinking kombucha for decades or you've just started enjoying it, Remedy has taken it mainstream and is shaking up fizzy drinks for good. So what is kombucha? Well, in a nutshell, it is fermented tea. This live cultured drink has absolutely no sugar naturally and is I Quit Sugar approved, as well as being completely raw, unpasteurized, and packed with organic acids and antioxidants, which means it's actually good for you. Remedy Kombucha comes in 9 tasty flavors, and my go-to is the ginger lemon. What will yours be? Learn more about the Remedy range at remedydrinks.com. And if you want a discount on your kombucha or any product in the Remedy range, just use my special promo code at the online checkout. Add the word UNHERE, all one word, and receive 15% off your next purchase. This applies to all countries, so even if you're listening outside of Australia, the discount will apply. Well, hello everyone. I'm Maritza and welcome to my podcast, Things You Can't Unhear. Today we're going to discuss the biggest nutrition myths going around. Learn about some groundbreaking new tips to achieve our maximum health goals using food, and delve into the importance of men's health. There's been a lot of focus on the ladies so far in this podcast, so I really want to make sure all the males out there can take something away from it too. So get listening, gentlemen. I have Joel Feren on today's episode, also known as the Nutrition Guy. Joel is an accredited practicing dietitian and nutritionist with a background in the biomedical sciences. He regularly consults to the food industry and in private practice, helping clients to achieve improved health with good nutrition. He believes that dietitians working in the food industry can play a fundamental role in improving the nutritional quality of our food. He also considers nutrition to be too important to be an afterthought for food brands and businesses. And I'm there with you, Joel. Thank you so much for being on the show.
No, thanks for inviting me on.
Now, I'm glad you're here actually, because the other day I got told that men in their 20s and 30s are probably the least likely to be listening to my podcast. And although it's most likely true, I think listening to this type of stuff, this well-being information that we're sharing on my podcast, would be a real eye-opener for men to hear some of what is shared over this. So let's start talking about men's health in particular. As a dietitian and nutritionist, how do you see men these days looking after their health?
You know, you highlight the fact that, you know, maybe men in their 20s and 30s are probably just not interested in their health. I think there's this element of invincibility that, you know, younger blokes have. And you know, I'm in my mid-30s now, and I think I displayed that when I was growing up. You know, I thought I was untouchable. I could eat what I want. I could drink what I want. And I'd always just be, you know, young and healthy. It was a little bit sobering, actually. A few years ago, I had a bit of chest pain and it was completely foreign to me. And I just thought it would go away. I took the she'll be right attitude. And it was actually my wife who said, look, can you just go see a doctor? Just get it checked out. I'm sure it's nothing. But, you know, just to tick that box. And look, I did. And in the end, it was nothing. I think it was a little tweaked muscle. But I'm really glad that I did, because it did put my mind at ease in the end. And I realized, you know, that I'm not invincible, that, you know, things are probably going to start breaking down as I'm now entering the latter half of my 30s. So I think for us blokes, you know, we do need to be aware. We do need to understand the pivotal role that diet and lifestyle can play in our overall health and well-being.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think we go through our 20s and 30s and we're like, you know what, I'm going to live forever and this body's going to just bounce back like it does every single time that I, you know, feed it terrible foods and drink to oblivion. And, you know, when we do start to get into the late 30s and mid 30s and early 40s, there is a bit of a wake-up call. So I think it's important for all of us to realize that, not just the ladies, but even the ladies too. We all are guilty of sometimes doing the wrong thing with our bodies. But just with men in particular, what do you see as a common thread with the people that you see? Is it them focusing on, do they come to see you when something's actually gone wrong, or do they decide consciously to come and see you to prevent any illness from happening?
Yeah. It's one of my biggest bugbears, Maritza. I feel like people come to see me too late. And look, I don't do a lot of work these days in private practice, but I still consult in that space. And I think typically I don't see the younger guys. I mean, I may get a few younger athletes who are looking to boost their performance through nutrition, but for the most part, I see blokes in their 50s with high cholesterol, who've been recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, who've got heart disease. That's when they come through my door. And I always think to myself, there's so much more I could do for you if you came to see me, just as things started to go wrong, or if you're looking at, preventative health and what you can do to improve the quality of, your nutrition, which is then only going to confer a health benefit in keeping us well and keeping us, fit and healthy. So I do feel like people come to see me when it's almost too late.
It's interesting. Obviously you are all mainly based around food when you give advice because you are a dietitian and a nutritionist. What type of diets do you recommend?
Yeah, look, it's funny, and I call myself a dietitian and that's what I'm qualified as, but I hate the word diet. It's always about healthy eating, and it's really not sexy advice, but it's always got to be tailored to the individual, and it's always got to be achievable. And I always say to my clients, whatever changes you're going to make as a result of today's session and future sessions, it's got to be long-term, it's got to be sustainable. So we can't just look at a short-term fix. Sometimes it's as simple as, getting someone to increase their fruit and veggie intake. And by and large, we know that the Australian population just drops the ball with regards to their fruit and veg intake. And men in particular, I think I came across a stat that only 3% of males meet both of their veggie and fruit intake over the day, their fruit requirements. So we know that we should be getting 2 pieces of fruit and 5 serves of veg. I mean, from my perspective, it's pretty easy to hit our fruit targets. It's a little bit more challenging to meet our veggie requirements. But, health can be as simple as increasing fruit and veg intake. You then increase and you maximize your intake of various nutrients across the board, in particular fiber. And we know that fiber is very protective against things like heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and we know the impact that fiber has on our gut health. And we're finding out more and more about the impact of our gut on reducing disease risk, but also improving our moods and mental health overall.
I was just about to ask you about mental health, actually, because mental health is a huge issue going along with a lot of young men these days. How can food help our mental health?
I think it's almost, I liken nutrition to one piece of a complex puzzle. And I think we can't put, apologies for the food cliche, the food pun here, but we can't put all our eggs in one basket. I think it's about ticking a number of boxes. So we've obviously got to tick things like sleep, exercise, even things like meditation, mindfulness, but sure, diet has a role. So we're finding out that actually the quality of our diets impact our mood and our mental health. And we believe that there's some impact in the gut, and we've got this interplay of the bacteria that live in our gut and the foods that help to support or help to nourish that bacteria. So we're really got to be looking at the diet quality overall. Once again, it comes back to things like fruits, veggies, whole grains, those types of foods that are going to really help support the health of our gut, which can then impact our mood and mental health. And we're finding out more and more, but we're looking at the quality of our diet, even from a young age and even during gestation, and how our mother's diet can certainly, impact our mental health moving forward and through adolescence and even through adulthood. So, I don't want to downplay the importance of nutrition. It's certainly fundamental, but we've got to look at the bigger picture as well.
When we talk about nutrition, and there's, you talk about whole grains and fresh fruit and vegetables, and a lot of us, especially younger people, will be like, yeah, but what does that look like on my plate? Do you know what I mean? How do we make that simple to go, I'm not picking up a pie and a can of Coke. What can I put that's healthy on my plate and make it quick and make it easy and not too expensive? Because, cost is also a factor when you're in your younger years and you're not making a lot of money, or you're studying and you're a student.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. We've got to make our advice practical, and it's all good and well telling people to eat more fruit and veg, but absolutely, how does that look like? You know, how do people apply that to their everyday diet? So, I mean, I think, look, fruit's the easiest one to tick off. I mean, I pretty much hit my two fruit serves at breakfast. You know, you can add things like berries to your breakfast cereal or brekkie smoothie. Chuck an apple in your work bag. Keep some dried fruit on hand. You know, it's really, really easy. When it comes to veggies, obviously it's a little bit more challenging, but ideally what we're trying to look at, particularly at lunch and dinner, is making sure that we've got half our plate filled with vegetables. And that could be things like, you know, fresh, it could be tinned, it could be frozen, as an example. I always say to my clients, any way you get them in is always going to be, it's always going to be good. So I don't care how you do it, if it's frozen, if you prefer steaming, or you want to chuck them in the microwave, whatever works best for you, just get them on your plate. And ideally we want to be aiming for lots of colour.
Yeah.
So another one of my cliched sayings is eat the rainbow. And we know that by eating the rainbow, eating as many different coloured vegetables as we can, we're actually going to maximise our intake of a variety of different nutrients.
Oh, gosh.
And
it's so true. My husband, one man that I know who is so good at this. My husband eats a massive bowl of salad as his dessert every night. I know he's incredibly unusual, but
well,
you know, when
there you go.
but when you finish your meal and you're still a bit peckish, instead of reaching for a bag of chips or something sort of unhealthy, that's what he reaches for. And I think that's an amazing thing to do, because for gut health, leafy green vegetables and that color of those salads are so good for us.
Yeah, bingo. And it's, you know, it's only going to be a good thing for weight. And we know that weight also can impact, you know, overall health and particularly mental health.
Given
too. So
he's not
your
that
husband
normal.
definitely gets a big 2 thumbs up from my perspective.
It's not that normal. I understand that. It's very, very peculiar.
Maybe he was a dietitian in a previous life. Not that we all eat bowls of salad for dessert, mind you. I don't mind the occasional dessert. I don't subscribe to this idea of good foods versus bad foods, but sort of I talk about everyday foods and sometimes foods. But hey, there are certainly worse things you can do than eat a bowl of salad for dessert.
And maybe the 80-20 rule as well. You know, are you on board with the 80-20 rule?
Yeah, I speak about this all the time. And for me, it just sits well because at the end of the day, I think everything has its place. You know, it could be chocolate cake, it could be ice cream. I mean, ice cream is my favorite food. And sure, I don't eat it every day, but I know that I can eat it, you know, maybe once a week, twice a week. Look, I try not to have any rules around food, but I know it's an option, and maybe that's one of the foods that I consider as part of my 20%.
Yeah.
Because interestingly enough, we know that the all or nothing approach just doesn't work. It's not going to be long-term. It's not going to be sustainable. If someone used to sit in front of me and tell me that I could never eat ice cream again, I'd walk away from that session that all I would want would be ice cream. But if somebody took the kind, gentle approach and said, you know what, ice cream is not the healthiest option, but from time to time you can still have it, that would really sit well with me. And I know that it would kind of be seen as, you know, maybe like a treat option, a special type of food, but it wouldn't necessarily be seen as something that's forbidden. And we want to, you know, we want to minimize that. We want to promote, you know, good quality foods as often as we can. That's always my approach.
Yeah, when there's too many rules, you start rebelling. And now I worked in an office a couple of years ago, and it was a production office, and there was 20 to 25-year-olds who worked in that office mainly. And it was so interesting because at lunchtime would roll around and all the girls would pull out the avocado and their salads and their tuna and their, you know, their crackers and all of their healthy foods, and all the gentlemen would be, you know, on the phone ordering takeaway with burgers and souvlaki's, and it was just so interesting to stand back and look at that. And not only from a food perspective, but I think the drinking culture for men is also a bit more intense than it is for women. A lot of us women can easily say, let's just catch up for a cup of tea and have a chat, whereas men would rarely, in my experience, call each other and catch up for a cup of tea. And it's always, you know, do you want a beer, or do you want to go to the pub? You know, it's that type of drinking culture that men have. What do you find with alcohol intake, and what's the appropriate amount?
Yeah, look, I'll start with the appropriate amount first. I mean, I'm just quoting the World Health Organization guidelines here, but we're looking at 2 standard drinks a day if you choose to drink every day, but still include 2 alcohol-free days a week, but never more than 4 standard drinks in a 24-hour sitting. And to be honest, I think the stats are actually somewhat encouraging. I think that comparing even 2007 to 2017, we're actually drinking less in terms of drinking to excess than we were, 10, 12 years ago. But it seems like the number of moderate drinkers is increasing. So maybe, it's that, catch up with a mate during the week and you catch up over beer rather than a cup of tea. That sort of behaviour that we see is increasing more. But interestingly enough, we're not drinking, we're not binge drinking. I think that was sort of big in the news a number of years ago. But, personally, I mean, I don't know if I've ever had a terrible relationship with alcohol, but I certainly drank in my 20s. And, we sort of joked about how, maybe young men have this air of invincibility about them when they're younger. But, I found that I just didn't bounce back all that well after, a few drinks as I sort of progressed in my late 20s and early 30s. And actually now I realise that I'm just better off without it. So, and I think on the, part of the conversation is always like, there's something wrong with you if you don't drink. If you catch up with mates and you have a soft drink or you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, like what's wrong? Why aren't you, why aren't you having a beer? Why aren't you having a bevy?
That's so true, Joel. I recently interviewed Ruby Warrington. She's in New York and she has started a movement called the Sober Curious movement. And her whole issue with sobriety was the judgment that she would get from her friends and her colleagues when she would not have a drink. And she said that wasn't actually about me, that was about them feeling uncomfortable with me not drinking. And absolutely. I think this is a massive shift that she's trying to create in this movement, is to just make it acceptable to catch up with your friends and not be almost judged for not drinking.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to see a shift there. I mean, it's funny. I bumped into a friend's wife last night at gym, and she actually mentioned to me that she's catching up with my wife on the weekend for a walk. And I thought, how nice is that? Yeah. As blokes, we don't typically do that. I mean, I've got one mate who I catch up with and we have a kick of the footy down at the park, and that's really great. But I kind of feel like those experiences are few and far between amongst blokes.
It's the talking that women are really good at as well, I think, because getting our feelings out and having someone to express our emotions to is so important for our mental health. I know that as a female, but men don't really get that from their mates as much, do they?
Yeah, I feel like things are a little bit different in my friendship circle. I'd like to think that we're pretty open and honest, group of blokes. But I think, maybe we kind of need alcohol to help facilitate that as well. And
drop the barriers.
Maybe only after a few drinks that we, we really share our deepest and darkest secrets. I'm not quite sure, but look, I'd like to think there's a little bit of a shift. And I think some of the statistics around drinking culture is actually shifting a little bit.
Amazing.
With that said, I do see it as a bit of an elephant in the room. I do see it's, we sort of get into bad habits where it's, a glass a night, which then goes into 2 glasses. And, I see it amongst the clients that I see, and I particularly consult in quite affluent areas. And I think, it's sort of the poison of choice, alcohol. And, it's seen as a way to relax, and it's seen as a way to connect with people. And I'd certainly like to shift that. By all means, it's fine to have a drink. And, from time to time, I do enjoy a glass of wine. And I'm not preaching abstinence here, but I think we've just got to be a little bit smarter with our choices at times.
I think it's just coming down to another way of finding how to relax without it, because that's why people reach for it pretty much, in my opinion. Now, I'll move on from that, but I want to talk about your campaign that you are promoting, and it's called Get Your Man in the Kitchen campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about that movement?
Yeah, look, it started a number of years ago. It was just a conversation I had with one of my mentors, and I was like, look, I really want to do something to help promote men's health, get more men in the kitchen. And she's like, why don't you start this social media campaign? So I try to get the message out there. And really the premise of the campaign is really simple. It's really just about encouraging blokes to get back into the kitchen, because the statistics actually show that more women take control of that domain. More women tend to take control of the cooking. But interestingly enough, men are increasingly interested in cooking, but they just don't seem to be taking that final step of getting into the kitchen. And once again, studies actually show that when we cook our own food, we actually consume less calories, less sugar, and less salt. And we know that's only going to be good for our health and obviously our waistlines too. So the campaign really is centered on getting blokes back in the kitchen, and you don't have to be a master chef. It's really just about putting something together. And that could be as simple as, cooking a piece of steak with a baked potato and having some veggies. I don't care if they're frozen veggies, just get back to basics. So I think the campaign, given its title, is almost aimed more at women than it is at men. And it's really about, encouraging the men in your life to take charge of their health. And we obviously know the importance of not only lifestyle, but also diet. So if we can just get back to easy messaging around food. It doesn't have to be a 30 ingredient recipe. It could just be as simple as chucking a piece of steak on the barbie, cooking a piece of fish, or maybe trying some of those vegetarian protein options like tofu or lentils. But just giving it a crack. Just
it can be fun too, right? I love cooking. I mean, I did love cooking a lot more before I had children and had the pressure of them pulling at my leg and telling me they're hungry all the time. but it's getting more fun again as they get older. But generally, you can put some music on and have a lot of fun in the kitchen. You can just enjoy it. It doesn't have to seem like a chore. Especially over
absolutely,
got more time.
It's kind of my happy place.
Yeah,
I really zone out. I find it really cathartic, and given my diverse, and job description, I actually do a lot of cooking at home, and I get to work with a lot of food companies and put together recipes. So it's something that I find really enjoyable and really relaxing, and I get to call the kitchen my office several days of the week. So
pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
So you are very good at busting nutrition myths, and in particular, you've been discussing the dairy industry lately. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think, I've sort of got the salt and pepper going on top, and certainly thinning as well. And I'd like to blame the diet industry for all of that, and some of these nutrition myths that get bandied around. I mean, they're just excruciating. But look, dairy's certainly one, and I think there's a well-known celebrity chef who pointed out that dairy leaches calcium from the bones. I mean, that's just absolute nonsense. We know that dairy has the most bioavailable form of calcium, and calcium's obviously important for building strong, healthy bones. And look, if you want to avoid dairy foods for ethical, environmental reasons, then that's okay. But if you're comfortable eating dairy, we certainly know the benefits of dairy, and they extend just beyond bone health as well. We know that dairy provides a number of key nutrients, things like protein, obviously for helping to build muscle. It's also a great source of vitamin A, vitamin B12, phosphorus. So we've got to look at the bigger picture here. But I think, with nutrition myths, I mean, at the moment, carbs are in the firing line, gluten's had its day, lectins, sugar. It's quite frustrating from my end. I've seen it all. Somebody once mentioned that carrots cause cellulite. Now, I haven't quite reviewed the scientific literature, but I highly doubt
it's doubtful. I think
that's the case.
That's most definitely a myth.
There's a wonderful opportunity for people to increase their veg intake, and carrots are a wonderful option.
Well, let's also talk about the nutrition myths associated with gluten.
Well, it's actually a protein found naturally in things like wheat, barley, rye, and oats. And look, celiac disease is obviously, quite a concern. And I think the stats are now that 1 in 70 people are diagnosed with celiac disease. And we know the only way of managing somebody with celiac disease is to promote a gluten-free diet. And they need to be particularly strict with that, because a small amount of gluten can cause issues with their gastrointestinal system, particularly at the level of the small bowel. But I think, look, we're still finding out more and more about nutrition, and the nutritional science as a science is actually quite young. But there's a term, it's non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So there may be some merit in people reducing their gluten intake, or, maybe avoiding it. But I think the science still hasn't quite uncovered exactly what's going on in those people who don't have celiac disease that may be reacting to gluten. But, we've sort of got to move away from this idea of single foods and single nutrients. And foods contain a wide matrix of various nutrients. So it may not even be the gluten after all that's causing some of these issues. I mean, a lot of people say that gluten causes things like bloating and tummy upset, but it may actually be some of the other components in those types of foods, like, bread and rye. It could actually be the carbohydrate component of those types of things that cause some of those physiological responses.
So one in 70, that seems like a big statistics on celiac disease.
Yeah, we used to say about 1 in 100, but the statistics are, I guess they're increasing. The incidence of celiac disease is increasing. Maybe we're getting better at recognising those types of symptoms, and maybe we're getting better at diagnosing them as well. But, it still leaves 69 out of 70 people.
I like looking at the positives. Well done.
Generally speaking, should be fine with gluten.
What about superfood nutrition myths? We're constantly finding new superfoods that are hitting the market that we all must have, and then they come in and out, and then something else comes up and we get obsessed with that. So are there any myths that are associated with superfoods in your opinion?
Look, I think my position's changed a little bit with regards to superfoods. It was one of those terms I absolutely despised, because at the end of the day, we can't get all the nutrients we need from one particular food. We've got to have a diverse range of different foods, and, incorporating all the different foods from the core food groups. I prefer to talk about super diets, to be honest. And super diets, from my perspective, is something that does tick all those boxes. I can talk about the Japanese diet all day long, and I think the Japanese just do it really, really well. They have included a diverse range of foods in their diet, and if you compare the
Okinawa diet,
Okinawa is I guess, I think it's northeast of Japan, and the Okinawans actually have the greatest rate of centurions, or highest number of centurions anywhere in the world. And what we actually find when we dig a little bit deeper with regards to their diet quality is that they have about 70 different foods in their diet over the week. And they have about over 30 different types of veggies. So if you compare that to the typical Australian diet, we probably rotate the same 20 different foods over the week.
True.
So it's really about getting that diet variety. So when I talk about something that's, super diet, it's not, once again, putting all our eggs into one basket and eating punnets and punnets of blueberries. By all means, blueberries are fantastic for us, but we've really got to make sure that we're, maybe getting some other fruit in there, obviously getting our fruit, our veggies too, focusing on things like whole grains, lean meats and meat alternatives, some of those veggie protein options, as I said before, legumes, tofu, and dairy. And if you don't like dairy, then making sure that you're having things like high calcium almond milk, maybe things like chia seeds, sesame seeds, those types of things. So at least you're going to hit the calcium, your calcium requirements over the day. But I think, we've got to break this tunnel vision that we've got, and we've got to really look at the bigger picture. And it's so much more than excluding gluten or excluding sugar. We've got to make sure that the quality overall is, tip top.
Yeah, it's a balanced diet. Going back to just that balance, and obviously unprocessed foods is the key.
Yeah, look, if we can promote foods that are, as closest to their natural state as possible, whole grains, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, then I think, most things will take care of itself.
Now, you talk a lot about intuitive eating as well. Now, by that, are you talking about, eating when we're hungry, and if you're craving something, then seek that out? Tell us what you mean by intuitive eating.
Yeah, I love this idea. So once, we talked before about food rules, and I think this is, shutting the door on food rules, because I think, diets, the way they work is they don't even teach people, they tell people when to eat and when not to eat, or, the types of foods that we should be avoiding. But intuitive eating really empowers people to not only make better food choices, but make more informed food choices around what their body wants. If you look at things like intermittent fasting, yes, there's some evidence to show that it can help body composition and certain biochemical markers, things like cholesterol and blood sugar levels. But I really think it's another one of these diets. So intuitive eating is really giving back people that power to make the decision of, do they want to eat? Do they need to eat? And, what types of foods are they craving? So, I get asked all the time, do I need to eat 3 square meals a day, or do I need to eat 6 small meals a day? And at the end of the day, everybody's different. Everybody needs to nourish their body, differently or at different times. So it's really about empowering people to be, cognizant of those types of cues as well. I think we often lose sight of, those feelings or those sensations of hunger. We sort of eat at 12 o'clock or 12:30 because it's lunchtime, or we wake up in the morning and we think, we have to have breakfast. But, maybe it's about moving away from some of these the structured rules around food and diets, and maybe just going, okay, I'm just going to roll with my body, and maybe acknowledge that no 2 days are ever going to be the same.
I think we've totally had that upbringing where it's breakfast is the most important meal of the day, 6 small meals a day, all of that we've had drummed into our heads from when we were children is we've almost got to just throw it out the window. I mean, I wake up at 7 o'clock and I'm not hungry until about 10. So I've just stopped that whole breakfast. I have a herbal tea or some lemon water, or even an English breakfast milky tea, whatever I drink, but I'm not hungry until about 10 or 10:30. So just dropping that breakfast meal for me has worked wonders, because I wasn't hungry. It was just almost forcing it down my mouth because I needed to eat something.
Yeah, there you go. Classic case. I mean, look, I actually love breakfast. It's my favourite meal of the day, and I know that, I guess not to the same extent, but I can't eat straight away. Maybe I wait an hour or so. Tend to be an early riser, and I'm a bit of a geek at heart, so I read the newspaper and have a coffee, and then I'm ready for breakfast. But I think, taking that pressure off, realising that, not everyone's going to be the same, so we can't have an all size fits approach. We've got to sort of tailor it to the individual, and giving them options as well, and going, okay, well, if you're not hungry on Thursday afternoon, don't eat afternoon tea. But on the flip side to that, if you find that you're, craving something on Friday afternoon, at least give yourself that opportunity to eat. And I think, it's sort of, we touched on it earlier about the forbidden fruit effect. It's sort of this idea that, we should be doing something a certain way, or we shouldn't be doing things, in other ways. And I think this idea of intuitive eating it reduces that pressure and gives people that power to go, okay, this is what my body needs, and this is how I'm going to nourish it. And I really like that concept.
So good. Now, how have you been working with brands? Tell us what impact you've had with some of the brands that you've worked with.
Yeah, so I guess I do a number of things. I kind of almost feel like I'm in the health marketing space. So I do a lot of recipe development, as I touched on earlier. So I get to cook a lot with various products. So there's one company I work with, and they make a clinical nutrition supplement, which is used for people who are, unwell, have undergone surgery and need some extra energy and protein to help with the healing process. Even used in aged care homes. And we know that people living in aged care homes are at risk of malnutrition and undernutrition. So I get to do a lot of recipes with those types of products. So that's a lot of fun. I also do a lot of media advocacy. So I get to talk about different products in the media and obviously social media as well. It's another medium that I've really, I guess, adopted. But yeah, and article writing. So I get to, you talked before about some of my work that I've done with dairy. So I do a bit of work with Dairy Australia, and I kind of feel like that's more in the advocacy space. So putting things up on social media and writing health articles that I either have published in publications or on my website.
Perfect. Well, you've definitely got a wealth of knowledge when it comes to nutrition. If you were to speak to, your 30-year-old average male right now, what should he walk away with your 5 top Joel nutrition tips?
Okay, so I'm sure we can get to 5, but I think we've really almost got to dumb it down, reduce the bar. I think, diet set the bar far too high. And once again, the changes that, we can make today, they need to be long-term. It's about creating a new normal. So maybe it's about getting an extra piece of fruit in a day, maybe having salad as a dessert option like your husband. I think that's a fantastic thing that we could all aspire to. Maybe it's about, reducing our intake of takeaway foods. Maybe it's about getting back into the kitchen. Maybe it's about, setting aside 1 or 2 nights a week where you just go, okay, tonight I'm going to cook, rather than getting in takeaway or Uber Eats, because we know how easy, all those things are and how accessible they are. And, next time you catch up with a mate, maybe catch up over a walk down the beach, or have a kick of the footy, or catch up at your local cafe and have a cup of tea rather than have a beer. So I think we've probably got the 5 tips in there, but I think it's really about making small, subtle changes that are going to be long-term.
Yeah.
And don't see it as a all size, fits all approach, or it doesn't have to be this idea that it's all or nothing.
Yeah. And
maybe
people become much more comfortable with gradual change, and then over time it just becomes a lifestyle change.
Absolutely. We know that behavior change is particularly tricky. And that's something that I deal, I guess, a lot with my clients is, it's all good and well giving these types of these bits of advice, these tidbits, but how do you actually implement it and how do you make it long-term? That's always the challenge.
Excellent. Well, thank you so very much, Joel, for your wonderful insight into nutrition. It's always great to hear classic reminders of what we need to be doing to maintain the longevity. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
I'd also love to hear from all of our listeners. So let's keep the conversation going. I'd love to hear what you thought of Joel in this episode. You can find me on Instagram at Maritza_Barone. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show and leave us a rating and review. And remember, be happy, be healthy, be conscious, and be kind.